Yes, that's right. Okay, Blythe.
Hi, we're here with Blythe Daniel. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And she is the author of Mended, Restoring the Hearts of Mothers and Daughters. And wait, there's more. It's also an invitation to follow Jesus into the heart realms of desire, brokenness, hope, and healing. And this book is so important because there's a lot of relationships that need to be mended between mothers and daughters. I know, for example, it's been difficult with my daughter, not just because she's a millennial adult that has a brain injury, but because I'm dealing with the same things that her friend is dealing with her mom. And so I'm seeing a pattern of a disconnect maybe between the old generation, old school thinking, and the new generation, new school thinking. And what about if we didn't have the best example of parents ourselves? And so there comes a point where somebody needs to make a difference and break. That's right. and break the chain. And there's where these books come into play. So Helen, tell me.
As my mom. Yes.
Okay, you're Blythe. About your relationship and how it led you to write this book, because you wrote it with your mom,
right?
Correct?
We did. Yeah.
Okay.
So my mom Helen did not have a good relationship with her mom. Like you were just saying, Amy, that sometimes we have not been mothered well, and so she was not mothered in the ways that she would have hoped for. And she knew that she could not continue that pattern of neglect and abuse, emotional and verbal abuse, and that she knew that she needed to do things differently with my brother and I. And she had tried over the years to make things better with her mom, but she really wasn't equipped. And I think that's where most daughters and mothers just don't have the tools to know how to try and reconcile or to try to come closer to each other in the relationship that's so tender. And it's so tender because daughters come from their moms and oftentimes even look like their moms. So you resemble your mom, you pattern yourself after her, whether you realize it or not. You have her DNA in you. And so it's difficult to break away if you don't consciously and Christ-like efforts to say, I'm going to do things differently, or I'm going to seek to do my part, but I don't own their part. I only own my part. So that's a lot of what we share in the book, is how to ask God to help you take responsibility for your part and not try and enable or push the other person to do something that they can do.
In other words, don't be influenced by learned behavior, but learn to rediscover the behavior that's correct through the love of Christ and Christ's teaching.
Right. That's right.
I love it. What a great concept.
And we often will say that, as Mom and I have learned with each other in our relationship, we've had a pretty good relationship over the years, but we've had areas that we've needed to work on with each other. We've had things that we needed to address between each other that were awkward or just hard conversations. And so
give me an example.
Is that an example of
yes.
When I was going off to college, I felt a bit smothered by my mom, trying to make suggestions and trying to, she really was just holding on. I was the last kid to leave the home. And so she thankfully even said to me, Blythe, I don't want to be controlling of you. I need you to speak up and say, Mom, that feels like control. And so she asked me to be the person to speak up, and it gave me the freedom to do that. Now,
and that's not something she had from her mom.
No, not
there
at
was
all.
No communication.
Her mom
it was do this her. Right. And very straight and military style.
Right. And,
I know that one.
And I think part of it is just learning to speak up. My mom would say that she wished that she knew how to speak up and say things to her mom. She was just afraid. And I think, back to your point about how things are different with our moms and their parents, that the way that we mother today is different, and there's different things that are in the relationship that
I was told kids speak when spoken to, and nowadays it's important to give the child a voice and to treat the child, even though you're the parent, as an equal. You shouldn't be a bully just because you're stronger. And I totally get that. And so even though you and your mother had conflict, you were able to reconcile. Tell me how you were able to initiate that.
So I would say that the area in our relationship that we needed to reconcile was when, probably the biggest area is when I became a mother. And it was easy for her to want to make suggestions and help me with what she thought was best in the situation, and with maybe even with my husband. And so she communicated a message to us through a letter that we didn't feel like had the same loving heart that she had portrayed in our relationship. It felt like she wanted to insert herself into the situation. And so what we needed to do was to be able to go, Mom, we understand your heart for us. Mom, I understand your heart for me, but this doesn't resonate. This doesn't feel like love. This, this is hard for us to see how you're responding to us and how we parent our kids. And so we had to have a difficult conversation of saying, I know that your heart is good for us, but this doesn't feel good. And so I think it's really about how do you speak up, even when it's really awkward and hard. But if we continue to stuff it and hold it in, it leads to a worse relationship, toxicity in the family, toxic relationships, guilt and shame and anger. And then you come out with things that you don't end up wanting to say because you get so angry.
You bottle it up.
You bottle up. Yeah.
And it comes out of negative behaviors.
Exactly.
And how about the conflicts that you were not able to iron out? Is it okay? Could you still forgive a mother that's not asking for forgiveness, like my mother? Or a daughter that doesn't ask for forgiveness? Can you still find healing even though the relationship is not restored?
It's so good. I mean, it's so hard, but it's such a good question to ask because God is the one who provides the restoration for us. He restored us to Him through Jesus Christ. And so He wants to provide restoration. And the book that we wrote, Mended, is based on Isaiah 58:12, which talks about the rebuilding of the walls and the ancient streets. And the way that God designs rebuilding relationships comes from that. And so there is a way to be restored to your mom, to be able to be restored in heart, and your heart towards God. You may not physically be able to be restored to her, but there is, we offer some prayers in the book of what you can say out loud or write in a letter that would just free your heart so that you aren't carrying that and walking around wounded from a relationship that never got brought back together. So it is possible only because of God and only because He provides us the means to be able to do that by saying, God, I realize that this person has never asked me to forgive them, but I choose to forgive them because of what Christ has done to me, to forgive me. And there's some other wording that we have in our book, but that's the gist of how to restore with someone who's never asked for it.
Would you believe God gave me the strength to email my mom, who I haven't spoken to since I was 18, and tell her I forgave her and that I don't judge her because I haven't been in her shoes. It's not for me to judge.
Mm-hmm. That's so powerful, Aimee, because not many women have felt the freedom to do that without.
It was extremely freeing because it's easy to say, I forgive, but can you act on it?
Right.
Can you see the person that took you to court for 14 years and say hello? Mm-hmm. I saw myself saying, I forgive this person, but I felt the tension and I did not want to say hello. And I changed my mind and I said hello, even though I didn't say it back. But that's real forgiveness.
It is.
When you're called to act upon it.
That's right. And you're taking a step towards that other person. It doesn't mean that you, like you, Aimee, it doesn't mean you forget what happened, but it's, I choose to move on. Yeah, it's saying, I choose to see you as God sees you, and I choose to not let this hold me as a prisoner. And sometimes people in our relationships take us as hostages, and those relationships become part of a prison. But we can break free when we can say, God, I choose to not let this define my life, and I'm choosing to walk above it and to walk towards the person even if they don't reciprocate. That's where we gain the freedom, and that's where we can say, okay, I've done everything I can. I've done all to stand, as Scripture teaches us to do.
At least you do the right thing.
That's
and
right.
It's important not to let circumstances or other people, no matter how miserable they are, change who you are and turn you into a hard person, into a miserable person. And what would you say, let's say, I know that for my mother, there's no hope based on her response. There's no hope. But I can never lose hope for my daughter.
That's right.
And what would you say to mothers wanting to be close to their daughters when their daughters don't understand? My aunt is having an issue with her daughters. What can you say to people like that? That they are forgiving to their daughters, even though they don't say they're sorry, even though they know they're right, they don't care, they're willing to be wrong. What can you say to them if their daughters continuously push them away?
I think for that person who would love to be reconciled with their daughter or have any kind of a relationship, it would be to say, I see you and I see where we are right now in our relationship, and we do have this difference of opinion, or we do have a big problem, but I want to have a relationship with you. I want to be close to you. So it's acknowledging that there's a problem, and it's acknowledging the desire. And then the last thing you would say is, what do you think we need to do to make things better? Because then it gives them the opportunity to say, I think we just need to do this, or I don't. And if they say, I don't think there's anything we can do, then you can respect that and walk away. And just before you walk away, though, you can say, I hear what you're saying, that you don't feel like there's something, but my heart is to do this with you. My heart is to come back to this conversation in a couple of weeks, and let's talk again and see if there's something that has come to your mind. Because it's just an openness. You never want to close the wall.
In your book talks about this.
It has these conversations in it. It does.
That is amazing conversation. I love it. Mended. It's amazing.
Thank you.
I have just a couple more questions, if you don't mind. What are the 5 steps to take off the responsibility of the other? You talk about 5 steps to try to lessen the tension and open the relationship.
The first step is to really own your part of the relationship, and it's to say, I know this is what I bring into this relationship. I know this is what I've messed up on. It's to own your own part, not trying to own what somebody else has done, but to really own your part. And to second,
what if the part that your daughter wants you to own, it's something that's not true? It's something that she's just invented.
Yes, so you are a truth teller, and you're only going to own what you know to be true. And that falls to the other person who might have an issue with you. That's their responsibility or their thought. So you only own what you know to be true. And you can bring that other part up and say, I know that you feel like this is true of me, but that isn't true, and I'm going to need to take that off the table. And we can talk about that, but that's not my responsibility, because I'm only responsible for my thoughts and feelings and actions, and you're responsible for your thoughts and feelings and actions. So we can't take on what someone else has to say out loud to themselves even. So
I love
that part of responsibility. And then,
that's
great. It's just really looking at another part of that would be asking God to show you how you would move forward in a relationship once you've taken your own responsibility for your part, is to then what do you do with that? And that's where sometimes we want to help the other person. We want to make decisions for them, and we want to make things better. And really, we're only called to do our part. And so it's just being responsible.
Right, because we're not going to try to change somebody or try to control them. We can give them suggestions. I think even you say it's a good idea for us to ask permission to give ideas and feedback. Yeah. And who thinks about that? Everybody always wants to be helpful. Yeah. Well, I know what you can do. I never thought about it that way.
And the way that practically works is to say...
a suggestion?
Yeah, and the way that practically works is to say, are you okay if I give you some feedback? Or is it okay if I make a suggestion? And if they say no, then you don't. You don't want to push that. But if they're open to it, then you have the freedom to invite yourself into a conversation, but you aren't automatically inserting your opinion and your comments and making that person feel like they couldn't have thought of that on their own.
Wonderful. And even at the same time, if you can say, oh, do you have any suggestions? Then you empower them to feel like they matter.
Right.
What they say is important. They can be part of the solution.
Exactly.
And that changes everything around. I love it. There isn't room for codependence in a relationship when 2 individuals are dependent on God, not on each other to fill them up. Would you like to expand on that?
I would. It's easy to try and find our peace, our love, and our joy through another person. And we know that that can only be found in our Father God. And so if you're trying to find that in a daughter or a mother, you're always going to be disappointed. The only way that you will not be codependent on someone else to provide that for you is to look to God. And the way that you do that is to ask God, God, show me where I need to find peace in my life. God, give me your joy. Give me your love today. I'm not going to look to a person or a place or a thing to give that to me. I'm only looking to you.
Is it because when it comes to people, we can have unrealistic expectations?
Exactly.
But when it comes to God, nothing's unrealistic.
Perfect way of saying that. That's so true. And we try to have our expectations of others met through other means, especially with relationships. And relationships can disappoint us in expectations. But you're right, God doesn't ever disappoint us in that.
There's another quote I like to say. Even if your mother or daughter has wounded you and never asked for forgiveness, you can be set free. You can forgive her. You have control over her. You don't have control over her choices, but you do have control over what you do. And I think that's the most important thing in life, to be focused on bettering yourself. Because when you better yourself, you're setting a good example for your daughter. People don't learn by being told. People don't like to be told what to do. People learn by seeing something they like.
That's right.
Something they'd like to model. So I think that the best way that you can teach your daughter is try to be a good model for her.
That's right. And to make sure that she understands that you are going to God for your happiness, your wholeness, your healing, and that she's not responsible for that. Because sometimes mothers can project that onto a daughter, or a daughter can project that onto a mom. It's your fault that your marriage didn't work. It's your fault that me and my brother aren't close anymore. And so learning to just say, that is not my responsibility. That's not my fault. And like you say that to yourself, and what you can say to the other person, to your daughter or your mother, is, I see that you're hurt. I see that you feel pain from this. And what I want you to know is that I'm looking to God to fill up my heart and my relationships, and I want you to as well. I don't want you to pin that on me. I don't want you to try and find it through me, because I'll never be able to provide that.
So give them also their own independence,
Yes.
and realize they have to grow and learn for themselves. And I think that we do have a responsibility as mothers, is to love our children unconditionally.
That's right. It's good.
And I think when you do that, everything else comes into play. But this has wonderful suggestions. Mended. It's really a beautiful book, a beautiful read. Thank you so much for everything that you do, for being there.